The show starts in a peaceful field where people are working under the sun, enjoying music. Santiago Vega, known as Tiago, a young boy helping his father in the field, likes playing sad songs. Then, Magda, a demon of discord, predicts that humanity is inherently evil with her sister, Santa Muerte, the angel of death. Magda believes everyone has a hidden darkness that will eventually surface, leading to chaos and destruction. She plans to prove her theory by subtly influencing people to give in to their worst impulses. Magda splits from Santa Muerte and moves towards the field, where crops suddenly catch fire, tragically burning Tiago's father. Tiago rushes to his father, but Santa Muerte pushes him away, leaving a burning handprint on his chest. This moment marks a profound and tragic turning point in Tiago's life. The scene jumps ahead to Tiago celebrating his appointment as becoming the first Chicano detective in the Los Angeles Police Department with his family. After the celebration, Tiago's mother, Maria Vega, walks with him to the bus stop as they chat about his new role. Maria notices construction equipment on the roadside and briefly considers how the new road construction might affect their community. However, she quickly shifts the conversation back to Tiago's success that evening. Shortly after, Tiago boards a bus and returns to his modest room, preparing to rest for the night. Early in the morning, Tiago gets an unexpected call from his work partner, Detective Louis Michener, asking him to start early. Louis informs Tiago that Captain Vanderhoff himself has assigned them a case at the La Riverside. At the crime scene, they find 4 bodies, each with faces carved into Day of the Dead masks honoring Santa Muerte, and their hearts removed. After examining the bodies, they return to their office. While Tiago changes his shirt, fellow officers start teasing him until Louis intervenes. Tiago asserts his independence to Louis, who challenges him to stand his ground before leaving the room. They later meet with Captain Vanderhoff, who reveals the victims as James Hazlitt and his family from Beverly Hills. They leave the office to investigate the Hazlitt family's home. The next day, Maria arrives at the mansion where she works as a housekeeper for Dr. Peter Kraft, a pediatrician. Peter is having breakfast with his sons, Tom and Trevor. Before heading to work, he instructs Maria to inform him if his wife drinks any alcohol. At his office, Peter treats a young asthmatic boy named Frank, who is accompanied by his mother, the human form of Magda. She introduces herself as Mrs. Brenson, claiming to be married to a violent American husband. Mrs. Brenson attempts to flirt with Peter, but he steers the conversation towards Frank's treatment instead. After their discussion, Mrs. Brenson leaves Peter's office and enters an elevator where she mysteriously absorbs Frank into herself. It is evident that Peter is somewhat intrigued by Mrs. Brenson, despite steering clear of her flirtatious moves during their conversation. During his lunch breaks, he dedicated his time to marching with the pro-Nazi German-American Bund. He was adept at it, using charm and persuasive arguments to discourage Americans from taking any interest in European affairs and enjoying their own lives. Meanwhile, the entire town gathers at the council hall for a hearing concerning the construction of a highway that would impact the Mexicans' homes and community. Councilman Charlton Townsend proposes starting construction as early as Monday, which angers the townspeople, including Raul, Tiago's brother. When Raul questions where they will go once their community is destroyed, Townsend coldly suggests they return to where they came from. This sparks uproar in the council hall, bringing the hearing to an abrupt end. Later, Charlton Townsend's assistant, Alex, who is the second human form of Magda, supports his decision and assures him of impending success. She arranges a secret meeting between Charlton Townsend and Richard Goss, a German architect who is secretly a part of a Nazi infiltration in Los Angeles. Goss aims to promote Nazism in America by backing Townsend for mayor and expanding infrastructure, particularly highways. While Tiago and Louis grab a bite to eat, Tiago asks why Louis chose him as a partner. Louis replies that no one else wanted him. He then inquires why Tiago never wears a hat. Tiago explains that he wants to proudly display his heritage. After this conversation, they plan to visit the Hazlitt house to gather clues, and Tiago mentions he will ask his mother about the makeup found on the victims. Maria, deeply involved in the Santa Muerte religion and believing herself to be a witch, would likely have insights. After the short trip to Hazlitt residence, the detectives later learn that the Hazlitt family is deeply involved in a religion similar to a cult that is run by radio preacher Sister Molly at the Hazlitt estate. Tiago also finds out that Hazlitt was involved in the construction of the expressway that poses a risk to the neighborhood where his family lives. In the evening, Mateo, Tiago's younger brother, causes a scene when he catches his sister Josefina making out with a man at the restaurant. This incident sparks conflict between Mateo and Maria as well. Later, Tiago arrives and finds Mateo storming off in frustration. Tiago then questions his mother about Santa Muerte, urging her to inform him if she hears about any unusual rituals or gatherings related to the deity. Maria is taken aback because Tiago has never shown interest in their religious beliefs before. Despite her surprise, she agrees to share information with him. Maria also challenges Tiago, asking what he would do if he ever needed Santa Muerte's help. Tiago is left without an answer to her probing question. Maria, letting her guard down, asks her son to dance with her. Moments later, after a heartwarming mother-son dance at the music store, Tiago sits down with his brothers, Raul and Mateo. Mateo expresses his discomfort over seeing Josefina kissing a man. Raul and Tiago find humor in the situation, sharing a lighthearted moment together. Afterward, Tiago advises Mateo to avoid the construction site on Monday, and warns Raul about the potential consequences of opposing the police. This leads Raul to question Tiago's loyalty to their community, challenging him about where his heart truly lies. Unable to answer the accusation, Tiago storms off in frustration. The next day, Louis updates his crime board at home, adding a photograph of Richard Goss as he focuses on Nazi activities. Tiago visits to inform him he won't be reporting to the construction site where all officers are ordered to go. Louis warns Tiago about skipping work so early in his career, but Tiago leaves without any further explanation. That night, Maria successfully summons Santa Muerte, despite the deity's initial displeasure at being disturbed. Determined, Maria implores Santa Muerte for assistance. However, Santa Muerte rebukes Maria, reminding her that she only cares for the dead, not the living, and advises her to take decisive action in difficult situations on their own. Boldly, Maria challenges Santa Muerte, asking if she will stand helpless while her sister tries to take control of heaven. Santa Muerte growls fiercely before vanishing. Following the intense encounter with Santa Muerte, Maria hurries to Tiago, proclaiming him as Santa Muerte's chosen champion. She urges Tiago to prevent an imminent riot at any cost, cautioning that failure will result in bloodshed. When Monday arrives, Tiago finds himself in a tense standoff between the Mexican-American community and the cops. Tiago tries to calm the situation, reminding everyone of his roots in the neighborhood and his personal connections there, including his mother who lives nearby. Magda is also present, subtly influencing the officers with her words. Despite his efforts to reason with them, Tiago realizes the conflict is unstoppable. In a flash, Magda whispers to a young policeman, who fires his rifle, triggering chaos. In the midst of the destruction, Magda manipulates Raul, who starts shooting at the cops. The situation escalates quickly, with Raul even aiming at Louis. Faced with no other choice, Tiago is forced to shoot his own brother to save his partner's life. The scene unfolds tragically, with allegiances tested and family bonds shattered as Mateo witnesses his own brother shooting another brother in the heat of the conflict. In the following episode, Louis, injured from the chaos, advises Tiago to avoid the police stationed outside the hospital, warning that they might attack him just for being brown-skinned. Despite the warning, Tiago insists on entering the hospital to check on his brother Raul. True to Louis's caution, Tiago is initially stopped by the officers and then insulted by one of them. Inside, when Tiago questions Captain Vanderhoff about the number of Mexican deaths, he receives a harsh response. Meanwhile, Louis is questioned by Vanderhoff about who shot him. Louis claims he didn't see anything, despite knowing it was Raul. Tiago is deeply surprised and grateful to Louis for his actions. He then visits his brother in the hospital, where the doctor explains that Raul is being kept alive by machines and may not survive much longer. Maria remains optimistic about Raul's chances, believing he will soon recover. Tiago calls Mateo and instructs him to take care of the family. Mateo in response warns him, saying that if Raul dies, he will no longer consider Tiago as a part of the family, as only Mateo knows that Tiago was the one who pulled the trigger. In the hospital cafeteria, Vanderhoff puts pressure on Louis and Tiago, emphasizing how urgent it is for the city hall to put an end to the Mexican rebellion. In an effort to please the authorities, he demands that they bring any suspect who is Mexican in order to resolve the Hazlitt case as quickly as possible. He prioritizes resolving the Hazlitt case over solving it. Dissatisfied with these directives, Tiago and Louis decide to take matters into their own hands. Tiago proposes investigating the choir as part of their efforts, considering Hazlitt's reputation as a squeaky clean choir boy. At Sister Molly's Joyful Voices temple, Tiago and Louis encounter the televangelist's mother, Miss Adelaide, who makes an unsuccessful attempt to block their access to Sister Molly. Louis engages Adelaide in conversation to distract her, allowing Tiago to discreetly investigate further. Tiago seizes the opportunity to search for Sister Molly herself, while Louis persuades her to lead him to Hazlitt's office. When Tiago finally sees Sister Molly, he is instantly captivated by her presence. Inside the temple, Tiago witnesses Sister Molly delivering a powerful and charismatic performance to a captivated audience. By the time her performance concludes, Tiago finds himself deeply impressed and moved by her aura. As Tiago and Louis depart after gathering evidence and belongings from Hazlitt's cabinet, Louis shares his theory that the case was a deception. He points out the carved faces and the cryptic messages written in blood, suggesting it was staged. Tiago presses Louis about who would benefit from Hazlitt's death, but Louis admits he doesn't have an answer. However, he suspects Adelaide, believing she might be concealing something significant. At the beach, Dr. Peter enjoys a day off with his 2 children. When he encounters Mrs. Brenson, he invites her to join them, and they leave their kids to play together while they take a stroll. As the children explain a game to Frank, he mentions that dead people lie down, which unsettles Tom. Subsequently, Mrs. Brenson asks about Mrs. Kraft's whereabouts, and Peter explains she stayed home due to sensitivity to the sun. Mrs. Brenson shares her story of meeting her husband during a war and being compelled to marry him for survival. She dreams of escaping to Tahiti someday. After a while, they bid farewell to each other. As they part ways, Tom watches them with a puzzled expression. At the hospital, Maria remains kneeling in prayer, deeply absorbed in her faith. Mateo offers Josefina a drink and goes to fetch one for himself. Suddenly, he is surrounded by a group of officers led by Officer Riley. In the incident, Riley reveals that his partner lost an eye during the protest and seeks revenge by injuring Mateo's eye. Thankfully, Fly Rico, the leader of the Pachucos, arrives brandishing a knife, intimidating the officers to retreat. Rico reminds them of the broader community support he commands, countering Riley's attempt to assert authority. Turning to Mateo, Rico acknowledges his courage in enduring the attack without crying out, recognizing him as potential Pachuco material. He instructs Mateo to meet him at the Cat, a gathering place, affirming his acceptance into their group. In the office, Alex persuades Councilman Charlton Townsend to leverage the deaths of the police officers to advance the motorway project. She suggests capitalizing on public sympathy generated by the officers' deaths and proposes naming the motorways in honor of Officer West, further cementing support for their agenda. Townsend considers her strategy to use the tragedy to their advantage politically and for the project's progress. Tiago secretly makes his way to the temple through the kitchen, where he introduces himself to Sister Molly over dishes. They form a connection, and Sister Molly reveals how her mother thrust her into religious revivals from a young age, shaping her career around faith rather than pursuing fame. Their discussion turns emotional as Sister Molly questions Tiago about salvation, prompting a reflective exchange. She confesses a terrifying moment of emotional distress after failing to heal a dying child, revealing her inner struggle and vulnerability. Tiago reciprocates by recounting his haunting encounter with Santa Muerte following his father's death. Their intimate conversation is interrupted by Miss Adelaide, who offers legal assistance for Tiago to reconnect with her daughter. On the contrary, Louis and his 3 friends wait along the road. Keeping watch on Richard Goss, they observe him accompanied by a young boy. Louis quickly snaps a photo and decides to split their group into 2. Sam and Anton follow Richard as he continues down the road, while Louis and his other companion pursue the young boy who enters a nearby research laboratory. Unexpectedly, Sam and Anton are struck by gunfire from Richard's driver, causing their vehicle to violently tumble down a mountainside. As Maria prays in the hospital, the lights abruptly go out, startling her. She notices that Raul is missing from his bed. Following a trail of blood on the floor, she follows it until she discovers Raul standing before her, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. In the next episode, Louis discovers the burnt bodies of Sam and Anton. The pathologist informs Louis that they were shot in the head before being burned in their car. Louis asks the pathologist to keep this information confidential temporarily, then takes the bullet with him as he leaves. Outside, he prays mournfully for his deceased friends. Back at the Vega household, Mateo takes care of his brother Raul. He brings up the Pachucos and recounts how Rico intervened to help him against the police. Mateo then asks Raul if he remembers anything from the day he was shot, but Raul has no recollection. Mateo reveals to Raul that it was Tiago who shot him. Reflecting on Tiago's identity as both a detective and a Chicano, Raul remarks that Tiago is uncertain about who he truly is. He advises Mateo to observe Tiago's eyes to experience hell, and to insist on showing kindness to him. Shortly after Mateo leaves, Tiago enters and checks on Raul's well-being. Raul takes Tiago's hand and places it over his heart. In the gym, Alex assists Councilman Charlton Townsend with his fitness routine, while briefly updating him on the day's schedule. Just then, Councilwoman Beck arrives and confronts him directly. She firmly warns him against turning the Los Angeles City Council into his own version of a dictatorship. She emphasizes her long-standing opposition to figures like him, dating back to his childhood. It's evident she strongly opposes the construction of the motorway. Next, Louis waits for the boy who was seen with Richard the previous night. He picks him up in his car and drives to a desolate area beside the road. There, Louis starts pressuring the boy to reveal information about Richard. The boy hesitates, fearing for his life if Richard finds out. Louis reassures him, explaining that he's on the side of law and order and can ensure his safety if he cooperates. Meanwhile, Sister Molly breaks away from her usual routine to meet Tiago. She changes into colorful clothes and trousers, departing from her typical white attire. She waits for Tiago outside his police station while Tiago is working on the Grisly murder case, even though it's his day off. The captain intervenes, insisting Tiago takes the day off as intended. She meets Tiago at the bus station after he departs from the station. She expresses concern for his brother and engages in a candid conversation about their true selves. They decide to spend the day together, opting for simplicity by visiting a local fair where Tiago recalls about his childhood visits. Tiago opens up to Sister Molly about the tragedies his family endured, including losing his father in a fire, and 2 siblings to cholera. Amid their enjoyment, Randolph, Adelaide's driver, keeps a watchful eye on them. At the fair, Tiago wins Molly a doll as a prize, but she declines to take it home, signaling it's time for them to leave. Before parting ways, they share a brief kiss. Peter waits in his office for Mrs. Brenson's scheduled appointment for Frank's checkup. When she doesn't arrive on time, he cancels all his other appointments and goes to her residence. There, he finds Frank outside crying and discovers Mrs. Brenson inside with bruises on her face. As he takes care of her wounds, she confides in him about Mr. Brenson's anger towards Frank. Mrs. Brenson reveals that Frank struggles at school, bullied and without friends. Sympathizing with their situation, Peter invites them to Tom's upcoming birthday party, which she accepts. However, when Peter tries to get close to her, Mrs. Brenson rejects his advances, citing her discomfort in the residence. Peter respects her boundaries and leaves the residence. In the evening, Richard and Councilman Charlton Townsend meet at a meeting where the councilman instructs Richard to deal with Councilwoman Beck, who opposes the construction of the motorway. Richard gets furious at being ordered around, emphasizing himself as the activist of Adolf Hitler, and insisting he should be the one giving orders. This deeply offends the councilman, who angrily storms off. Alex, frustrated with Richard's behavior and finding Townsend hard to manage, rebukes Richard before going after Townsend. She tries to cheer him up with drinks, but Townsend remains gloomy and drives off alone. Alex undergoes a transformation into her Magda persona. As she strolls down the streets, windows inexplicably shatter behind her trail. Meanwhile, Mateo heads to a pub called The Cat where he meets Rico, the leader of the Pachucos. They dance together briefly before Rico introduces Mateo to Riene, another member of their group, and the third human form of Magda. Riene invites Mateo to join her for a dance. While they are dancing, Officer Riley enters the pub and imposes a curfew, singling out and ordering them to stop. In response, Riene punches the officer, sparking a brawl. Subsequently, Riene, Rico, and Mateo hastily leave the bar to evade further trouble. Outside the bar, Riene opens up about her story, detailing how her parents are from old Spain and she was born in Mexico before eventually relocating to Los Angeles when she was 3. She then persuades Rico to stand up against the police and reclaim what they deserve through intelligence and courage. Rico then recounts his own journey, revealing he was abandoned by his mother and never knew his father until he met the leader of the Pachuco gang, which transformed his life. Meanwhile, Sister Molly quietly enters her home only to be caught by Adelaide singing a song. Startled, Sister Molly quickly retreats to her room, where she breaks down in silence. Subsequently, Louis sits alone at a bar, having a drink when Tiago joins him. Louis shares that he'll be taking a few days off to arrange Anton's burial, as Anton had no one else to perform the rituals for him. He warns Tiago not to trust Sister Molly, suggesting she had connections with Hazlitt, who is under suspicion for financial irregularities and tax evasion. Louis hands Tiago Hazlitt's file, urging him to review it carefully. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.